I will.
It was something I will.
Yeah, it's on Friday night.
My grandson was there. I don't know what it is called, but I love it.
It's a lot of fun. I always find it fun. I'm afraid when my years are there. I need to just, it's hot now. It's on the pale side.
All right, I'd like to call the meeting of the Plainfield Board of Ed together tonight, Tuesday, June 11, 2019 at 7 o'clock p.m. Would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, we have the minutes of the meeting of May 8th, 2019. Is there anything anyone wishes to discuss?
I don't need to be a pain on the minutes, but it would be, I think, the third page of section E on the FY20 budget status report. Just to omit not. It will not be sent to a referendum on May 20th. It was sent to a referendum. That's all.
Anything further? All right, I'd be looking for a motion to approve as amended.
I move we approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor? All opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstain.
I abstain also, I wasn't here.
Okay, motion passes. All right, the minutes of the expulsion hearings of April 24th, 2019 and June 3rd, 2019. The April 24th we'll do separately. This was tabled because it should be made and seconded by the people that were at the meetings. And the rest of the board members should abstain if they were not at that meeting. So I'd be looking for a motion to approve the April 24th.
I move that we accept the April 24th expulsion.
I second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions?
I'll abstain.
I'll abstain. The minutes of the June 3rd, 2019 expulsion. I'd be looking for a motion to approve that decision.
I move that we accept the minutes of the expulsion hearing of June 3rd.
I second that.
Okay, motion's been made. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstention.
Abstention. Okay, motion's approved. All right. No communications that were received, so we'll move on to personnel. Resignations and retirements. I'm going to ask that Mr. DePietro walk us through these.
I want to first ask the board to please pay attention. You have a folder in front of you because we received some late resignations that we need to get to. We have one in your folder. We'll start with that and we'll go to the other ones. I made every effort to reach out to the board so they would be aware. So we'll get to those in 1 second. I would like to begin by asking the board to accept the resignation of Jillian Whiteneck. She is a social worker at Moosup Elementary School. She has had the opportunity to have a position which is close to her home, which would help her in her personal situation. As she stated, the students, the staff, and families will forever hold a special place in our heart. I do ask that you accept her resignation at the end of the school year.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion to accept the resignation of Jillian Whitener.
I move that we accept the resignation of Jillian White.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
The second one that I would ask is you have your folder and you open up, they should be in order. We received notice from Jeanmarie Morissette that she is resigning her position with Plainfield Central School Grade 6 Science. For purposes of her health, which she wrote and said, please feel free to share the information with the board so that you can accept her resignation for her personal reasons, and we do thank her for her service. So that is Jeanmarie Morissette, Plainfield Central School, Grade 6 Science.
I move that we accept the resignation of Jeanmarie Morissette.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
The next one in order, just in the way we organize for you, is a letter from Jeanmarie Petrocelli. I had the opportunity with Mrs. Cadro to meet with her for a brief time today, and Jeanmarie had announced to very privately that she was planning for this. She wanted some time to make her decision. She submitted her letter, as you can see, June 1st, and that she has been working for 31 years. She has been working in a grade 3 situation at Shepherd Hill, and she is now planning on her transition. She told us that her husband is retired and that she is now thinking of how she wants to start a transition to her next phase of her life, and she absolutely has loved the work she does. It's been her passion. To be able to educate the young minds of our future has always been her passion. I ask that you accept with regret Jeanmarie Petrocelli's resignation for purposes of retirement at the end of the school year.
I move that we accept the resignation of Jeanmarie Petrocelli for the purposes of retirement.
And I second that with a lot of regret.
I was going to say with regret at this point.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you again on behalf of all of these people. I ask that you accept the resignation of Dr. John Wu. He is a science teacher, biology at Plainfield High School. His letter basically stated that he was prepared to make this decision immediately. School is ending. I just ask that you accept his resignation effective at the end of this school year so that there is no financial loss that he has over the next 3 days or the 2 days left to the school year. So if you would just accept his resignation effective at the end of this school year. Dr. John Wu, Plainfield High School Science.
I move that we accept the resignation of Dr. John Wu, effective at the end of the school year.
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
So a little more unique is we have a letter from Jean Riley, who is the assistant principal at Plainfield High School. She has worked 13 years as a teacher in the middle school, and then she transitioned to be an assistant principal at the high school for the past 19 years. She has been working in that role. As she stated, her love for helping children will never wane, and she hopes to support the children of Plainfield and Sterling, and that it will be remembered, her work, her efforts. So I thought it was nice that if you know Jean and her base, her philosophical base, she has a very deep religious and philosophical approach, and she said an ancient philosopher and founder of Taoism said a leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will all say, we did it ourselves. I think that's a powerful statement of a leader, and I do ask that you accept with regret Jean Riley's letter of resignation for purposes of retirement. That would be effective August 31st, and she has said she would be willing to do help for any transition that anyone would need in this important position at Plainfield High.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion to accept Jean Riley's resignation for purposes of retirement.
I move that we accept the resignation of Jean Riley for purposes of retirement.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
And with also with personal regret and with notification that we received a letter from Mr. James Worth. After his 33 years working in education, he does plan to retire as of September 1st. As you know, Mr. Worth is pretty much the one principal of this new facility. Having started, he said, approximately 12 years ago here in this building. He was here before that, but he actually took over this position in leadership. So he is the principal of record who established this building and has brought it to where it is. He will remain until August 31st. He has made a decision that this is the point in his life and his career that he is prepared to transition, and he asks you to accept his resignation for purposes of retirement with sincere regret on my behalf.
All right.
I move that we accept the resignation of Mr. Worth with regret.
I second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
And as you know, Mr. Worth has been with us at these meetings every year that I've been here for the last 8 years. His consistency, his support has been unwavering for this district. So, it's a great loss.
Thank you all. It was not an easy decision, and I do appreciate all that the superintendent, Mr. DePietro, has done for me, for the high school, all the faith that the board has had in our leadership here at the high school, and I certainly do appreciate and have really enjoyed working with the admin team, the board, Mr. DePietro, and all the faculty and staff at Plainfield High School. So thank you very much.
Mr. Worth, I wish you the very best.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on, appointments. At this point, I would ask that we authorize the superintendent over the summer to hire, as we usually do every year, since we typically don't meet in July. So we give him the authorization to hire, and then come September, we make those appointments. So I'd be looking for a motion.
I move that we authorize the superintendent to hire as needed.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. All right, public forum. At this point, is there anyone who wishes to address the Board of Education? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to standing committees, individual reports. July, we typically consideration of a Board of Ed summer retreat. I feel as though since we don't meet in July, we may want to consider having a retreat. A retreat will enable us to kind of get together as a group informally and to kind of discuss some of our goals. Project 2020, believe it or not, will culminate next year. We have that. We have some other issues such as setting those goals for the next budget season and everything. So it's a great way just to kind of get together as a board and use that time to kind of free talk about what we think our directions may be. One of the dates that we were proposing was the 24th of July. And then, oh, I'm sorry, the 24th and the 25th of July. And then we were looking at the following week, which would get us into August. So I don't know if there's conflicts.
August is gonna be super busy.
Is it during the day?
It would probably be in the later evenings because I recognize that people do work. Light meal,
And where would this be?
that is to be decided depending on what we can do.
So what were the days, the 24th and the 25th?
Yep, we were looking at the 24th and 25th, which is a Thursday, a Wednesday, or a Thursday.
There's a Democratic Town Committee meeting on July 24th.
Yeah, there is.
The 24th is Democratic Town Committee, so that would not be a good day.
You guys can go. No,
That's just funny.
Them.
yeah.
So with the 25th, then, if we aim to try to put something together as a general consensus?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's aim for that, and I will email everyone, so that we can kind of get together and start to think about what the next goals for 2020 and beyond for the following year will be.
I can promise you, it's been, for those who haven't had a chance, it's a very uplifting meeting. We kind of look and reflect on things that have happened. You'll be surprised. Roofs seem to be mundane, that we did all the roofs, but you'll see playgrounds that we've done. That's capital, but we also hear curriculum, and you'll see things that we've done to change, like our writing, that we actually brought in penmanship, which is kind of one of those traditional things. We forget all the things we do, that kind of sparks the discussion of why are we here, and then we look at where we want to go, and we try to think of how do you map it. You already have a plan in place, but the targets need to change. You have a plan of capital only to 2020. So you need to get for the next 5 years. So that would help you just start the discussion. But I do appreciate you getting together. Summer's a nice time. We'll make it enjoyable.
Okay. So moving on to community engagement, Celebrate Plainfield Day is going to be on August 3rd. I wanted to bring it up at this meeting since we don't have a meeting in July. On that day, Discovery Bus is scheduled, if the weather holds, to be at the Celebrate Plainfield. So I'd be looking for Board of Ed volunteers to be at Discovery Bus at a table. Unfortunately, this will be the first one I will not be able to attend.
I'll be there.
Okay? So,
I'll be there.
okay.
And I'll be there too.
Wonderful. I think it's a great way to engage in the community. I had also hoped to have the Discovery Bus schedule to share with everyone tonight, but that's going to have to be emailed. But please come on Tuesdays in July, starting on July 9th, the 16th, the 23rd, and then that following, I believe it's the 27th. 4 to 6 p.m. at the ECC, which is also the farmers market. There will be a great way to engage the community events for our readers. And I know that we also have some board members that are scheduled to read on the bus this year. So we will definitely get that to everyone. Are there any individual reports anyone wishes to address? Hearing none, we'll move on to old business. Mr. Lucier, fiscal year 19 budget and facilities report.
Thank you, Mrs. Haskell. Here we are at the end of the year. Interestingly, it was just this past few weeks where the town has approved the $551,977 to be added to our original budget, bringing us up to the minimum budget requirement of $35,983,47. I'm really happy that took place. It's going to help the town avoid a $1.1 million penalty, and it brings us into compliance with the state of Connecticut. I am expecting to end the year. Now, something you'll see on this report I gave you needs to be amended. I make the comment that I'm expecting to end the year $5,000 under plan. It's actually $556,977 under plan. We have committed to not spend the money that was being appropriated. And my report doesn't reflect that, even though that is the case. What you see is the 5,000 is against the original number. The administration has done a wonderful job of holding down costs. If I can find a few extra dollars somewhere, I will be reaching out to the administrators, asking them for a particular item that they feel they may want to spend some money on this year, so that we can still provide the things to the students that we need to. On the PMS fire claim, Mr. Suprin had reviewed the $231,000 adjustment that I had sent to him, and he said my information was in order. He asked that I hold off until after June 1 to submit my final numbers, of which is an additional $26,000. He has subsequently handed off the file to an associate who has asked me to pull together the final number, which is now $257,000, which includes the $26,000. They are currently reviewing that, and hopefully we'll get that money within the next few weeks. Everything appeared to be in order, so I don't have any fears that we won't get that money. Something to keep in mind, the additional monies that happened just from June 1 was an invoice that I received for the asbestos abatement, where they had done some work on the rooms that had burned out. That was done back in December. The invoice just came to me last week, so that's why it got added to the claim. So it looks like we're going to end the year under plan, and it looks like we'll get our full insurance payments back, so I'm looking forward to those monies. So that's all I have for the fiscal year 19 report. I can move on to item B of the agenda for the FY20. What I have done on this particular file was reduce the $50,000 that the town had asked us to reduce. Mr. Petro, myself, and Mr. Sugarman had looked at the budget and determined that there was an area in tuition placements for the Charles Barrows School. They have given us a report that shows we have 9 less students going there than we had previously, which allowed us to be able to remove $40,000 from the plan. So of the $50,000, 40 of it's coming right out of the tuition line, which will have no impact on any of the student learning and needs of the students within the district. The additional $10,000 reduction is coming from our OTPT agreement that we are making with Sterling. They're going to help us reduce our costs in that area, and it looks like it'll be about $10,000. So the budget has been reconciled for FY20 to be $35,930,347, and that should still remain within the MBR requirements. So we're looking pretty good for next year. And that's all I have. Mr. Petro, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
That does require a vote. We cannot do that without the board's approval, or if they have an alternative to the $50,000.
So is there any discussion?
It would be kind of hard to do that without really looking at all the other options. So I'm in favor of this. You know, I don't know. I mean, it solves it. I mean, we have to solve it.
Yeah, it
You know,
does
I don't know when we're going to start looking at how many baseballs that have, you know, down the gymnasium. We can't do that.
Alright, so I'd be looking for a motion to reconcile the budget to $35,930,347.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Mr. DePietro, LED conversion project update.
I put this on the agenda because the board has said we will continue to follow the LED to its conclusion. You have approved Plainfield Memorial School, you approved Shepherd Hill, you approved Musa. All 3 schools have been converted over to the LED, or are in the final stages of some adjustments that we've needed to do. For example, at Shepherd Hill, in order to meet the requirement, because the aerator reduction, which would save, believe it or not, some electricity, does not punch on the electricity at Shepherd Hill. So they had to find other ways to save electricity, whether it's sealing doors better so that it'll save the heat running, which will do it, in order to meet the grant requirement. But we are in the final stages, and we also have Eversource working with us, so that by the time we get together in August, you should have at least 3 to 5 months of clear understanding of what LED conversion has saved in terms of cost, although the net dollar amount will be consistent for the most part, because you are going to save the LED cost over a period of 4 years. By the money you save will be paying off the loan we took for the LED conversion. After 4 years, it will be a true realized saving for the community at the amount of money. So if you're paying $10,000 a year for a school or less, that money will be fully realized 4 years from now. So we want to show you the kilowatts that were saved. You have 2 schools that we have left. If you remember, you were waiting to hear because we, number one, could not stop those projects because they were so large that they took more kilowatt usage than the small grant that we were getting for the 3 small schools. It's a different grant. It's equal in the savings, but we never received the full analysis of PCS, being a larger school, or PHS. We do not have that tonight. You cannot act on that tonight. So the concern, it's not a concern, just the reporting part of that is the fact that until we get that, you will not be able to authorize until your meeting in August, those schools. If for some reason we hear something earlier, you are having, for example, if you have sufficient quorum and you want to have a special meeting for your retreat and we can do something, that's your choice at that point. I just have to report that without that information, without the assurance that we can afford the loan and that the loan will be covered by the savings in the conversion, we cannot exercise.
If we were to vote on something like that at a July retreat, then that's not a retreat, it's a meeting, it would have to be advertised, right?
Yep.
It would have to be a special meeting, and you can easily, if you're having a retreat, you could say we're having a special meeting first, and it would be a one agenda item. You open the meeting, you say we're going to do it, if you had sufficient information, and then you could go into a retreat. The retreat is also fully notified that you're having a retreat. People can come and watch a retreat. That's not typically what the public want to come for, but it's always open.
Is there a hurry to get it done? Why would we have to?
Well, that's the second part. The next one you notice says the solar energy project. But the solar energy project is going forward, and we all know what's going to happen, and we know what that is. So the issue is the solar energy will do savings across all uses of electricity, not just lighting. So that is the more substantial savings.
I think in terms of the LED conversion project report,
Yep.
I think we have a committee with Ms. Berry and Mr. Redon. I think what we could do is when that conversion report comes in, we could assemble as a committee, look at that report, and then address it at the August meeting. If that.
That makes sense to me.
Because these reports are pretty substantial, and we want to make sure that we are crossing all our T's and dotting our I's. We've had some hiccups with this LED conversion.
So is anyone looking for a motion, or are we just looking?
No, it's a report that basically lets you know why we're not acting on those 2 schools. You need data before you can determine that the money you're saving will cover the expense of the loan.
And it's a report we don't have yet.
We don't have that. And they're working hard on it. It's just that this is...
What percentage that a student has missed. And again, we're back to, there's not a one-size-fits-all solution to this problem. Other schools and other districts have made progress on this. I definitely believe that we can make great progress on this, but it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all thing. You're really looking at these bands, and these are real numbers here. So I took 10 absences. This is our real data range for our student. One student missed 150 days. So you can see where they fall in the band by the percentage of schools that they missed each year. Okay, and this is like wraparound services for all students that come to school every day, things like a great climate, the relationships that you make with students when they come in the door, reading them, things that you would just do for every kid regardless. And now, as a student approaches, 18, 19, 20 days out, okay, you're developing personal outreach, personal attendance plans, you're doing a guidance administrator, a parent meeting with the child and things like that. And those we've been doing after 3 days. So these are your tier 2s. And your tier 3s are really your high level intensity kids who have missed, 25% of the year, 50% of the year. And why this is important and why I'm showing this slide is things that work down here are not necessarily going to work for these kids. These kids are much more intensive. They're not going to care about things like school-based policies, but down here, school-based policies are effective. And what we're looking at is we're looking at shaving percentages off through a lot of different means, not just taking one chunk off with one giant intervention, but wherever we can shave numbers, including things like as simple as data reporting, as simple as things like medical absences. Okay, wherever we can shave and look at those numbers, we're going to do that. Our bottom line is we care what the state says as a district, but much more importantly, we care about our students and that we're doing the best for our students and their well-being. So the state has this interesting kind of loophole, wormhole that Mr. Petrie and I talked about. If a student receives online instruction from a certified instructor during the day, they're not considered to be absent. So if a student was out for suspension, if they were out for extended medical reasons, we can curb those numbers by providing them an online tutor. So it's things like this where we're kind of rethinking traditional schooling a little bit, where they have to come in every day and they all have to take their standardized curriculum. By kind of personalizing this a little bit, or thinking outside the box, or providing some online tutoring services somehow, I think we're going to get a big chunk of those numbers down. So these are our reasons. These are our reasons in order of prevalence. So we took that entire list of 130 students and we coded them, and many of the students are cross-coded, but for sake of simplicity, so medical absences is our highest occurrence. Most students on that list are out for medical reasons. Then school refusal and avoidance. Parents have difficulty. Maybe they need help getting their child out of bed in the morning. They don't want to get out of bed super early, get on the bus, things like that. And we've done things like staggered start times for those kids, bringing them in later, doing some intensive tutoring. Huge in our community, family issues in the home life, not being super stable. We've developed some solutions for that, school-based anxiety, the size of the school. So a lot of our students are caregivers for younger siblings. And then a lower prevalence, which is good for us, students that were court involved or discipline-based, suspensions, things like that. And down here, you're going to have things like, I didn't list it, but it was a fairly decent number of things like family vacations during the school year. And again, that's parent education, like working during the allotted times and the allotted breaks to give those students time where you can still have those opportunities with your family, but not miss school. So solutions, this is nationally, I'm not talking at the local level, but we have to look at things nationally as we bring it back in. Despite the best efforts, chronic absenteeism remains a vexing national problem with no one-size-fits-all solution. Effective solutions are community-based, providing national research, nuanced, and multimodal, so a lot of different approaches. And it is chronic absenteeism, like I said, is a K-12 problem, not just a high school problem. All right. What we developed in the plans, things that we're putting in, so we're going to have 2 tiers. We're going to have the school-based solutions and the community-based solutions, and a lot of those overlap, so you'll have some community-based solutions in partnership with the schools. School climate, we continue to work on school climate. We want the best school climate to be warm and welcoming, and students to come, but that's not going to work for every kid. Part of that is the coursework they take. Part of that is student choice is a giant driver for kids if they have a choice in the classes they take at the high school level and curriculum and being interested. I know your makerspace attendance, the days at makerspace is huge, right? So that drives that on that day, that drives that. I know, and I talked about taco, I think I talked about taco Nacho Friday last night. On Friday, you think a lot of high school kids would not come to school, right? They come for the nachos. They come for the nachos.
If you eat in school.
Whatever works.
Policy discussions, and this is probably the most loaded one of all, but it's important that we don't get hung up just on policy. Policy is effective for a subset of students, and we're looking at shading numbers across the board. Policies, and you can get all into the weeds when we talk about what's a good policy, what's not. We have to be kind of above that work. The policy is going to support the kids that it'll work with in the classroom that's going to have effect. So again, it's going to be those tier 1 and those tier 2s, where your tier 3s not so much, and then you're going to need more personalized school-based things, programming, the online stuff, the working in smaller groups. things like that. This is a huge one. I really believe we can get 5% on that with that online piece. I really believe I can shave 5% if we set that up and figure that out. We do have several online systems, the ESLs that we use. The conundrum that we have with that is a lot of kids prefer that, so if we open that can of worms, our students staying home because now it's easier, I can just go on my laptop and I can listen to YouTube and I can do this. So I don't know where that sweet spot is. I don't think a lot of people do, but we're still working on it. But I know that they're receiving some instruction rather than no instruction if they were going to stay home anyhow. So we have to find that middle ground. School-based attendance, Mr. Peter put in the budget for a school-based attendance outreach person in the police department to actually go either on their own or with a school-based official like a counselor or an administrator to do those home visits and say, hey, you didn't come to school today. And that has been effective for us at the high school. It is a lot of man hours, but usually it works for some kids great, for some kids it doesn't work. But it has worked for some kids, maybe 50%, so we should probably shave a couple percents there. Parents and student meetings and intervention teams, as increased social and local support, as we've seen this rise in poverty, we've seen a huge number of kids come to us with just horrific backstories that's getting in the way of A, their learning, and B, their attending school. So we kind of have to work around that and kind of remove those obstacles for those students so that they can be successful. And there's a lot of tools, we did a whole year on it. We still have more work to go. There's things that our faculty are figuring out and collaborating on. There's things that the outside folks who teach us about how to do this. So it really does take this community, and it's not something that we can just do on our own, nor should do on its own, because it's a community issue. And then this has worked for some students as well, but it doesn't work for incentivizing things, right? Slushies, right? The ice cream cones, right? We've done food works very well for some kids. School store vouchers works well for some kids, but again, not for all schools. So we're looking at all these different approaches and pulling numbers. Community-based solutions. Current national solutions have moved away from court-based interventions. Connecticut especially has kind of moved away from any kind of punitive consequence for students missing school. So the old, model of the truancy officer knocking on your door, it'll be an outreach person, but they're there to support the families. They're there not as a punitive thing to hand out a ticket to the parent. They're there to say, what can we do as a school district to support you and help you come to school? Increased human service supports for students and their families. This is going to be inside the school and outside the school. You talked about CHR, Scott, a little bit, right? Things like that. Basically, in the school, Killingly has a DCF substation in the school. So you kind of have this available services, one-stop shopping, where you can get the family in, you can get them the supports they need, or you can refer them to community-based solutions. Increased parent education. This is so important. It is not a good idea to keep your elementary school student home because you want to spend time with them. But once in a while is great, but if you're doing this on a regular basis, it's also so important to teach them that the detrimental effect that missing days in second or third grade will have on their academic trajectory all the way through K-12 and even after that. It's huge. It's additive. 1 week here, 1 week in the third grade, just adds up fourth grade, boom, 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 all the way through. And that's where we're starting to see the data and the data trends. A regional youth service bureau or attendance bureau. We had the JRBs. My friend Mark Irons was he works for juvenile probation services. Very knowledgeable on the subject. He came, he's also a community member and parent in our student in our school system, came and spoke. It was probably our best meeting we had all year, spoke about what was going on about that and gave us their perspective about why the justice system kind of stepped out from this and kind of left it on the school systems. And what he said made a lot of sense. And he said, by having these community-based attendance bureaus where you have a dedicated person that might serve one community or 3 or 4 communities, you can go out and you can provide these services, you can point people in the right places, in outside agencies in the school itself. So that's what we have. I have for you guys, if you want, I have some really in-depth data in crazy slides on all the pieces, and you can see where our patterns are, but I think that's a really good overview of what's going on. And I think the important thing is we stay the course. I'm really happy with the work we did on Adopt this year because we didn't change the numbers. The numbers are flat. We actually went down 0.4, but when you adjust for the error in the reporting, they're flat numbers. But we stopped the bleeding on what we did, so something we're doing is working there, okay? So the poverty rate, again, is going to be what it's going to be, and how we respond to it is on us to provide the best for our students to do that. Moving forward, I want to see those numbers, our goal next year is below 20, 18, 15. I'd like to see those numbers move in that direction, regardless of what the poverty rate does. I think if we can do that, we'll be doing great work as a team. I'm incredibly thankful to Mr. Nagel and everybody else from this academy that came and gave up their time to work on the adopt team, and I think we just did some great work this year. This is a problem that we weren't going to solve in 1 year, but I think we've made great progress in terms of the data. I think Mr. Petrocelli's got some solutions and suggestions as well, and I think what he has is great, and will support what we're doing. And when you put all these pieces together, I think we have a pretty solid plan. Sorry if I was a little long-winded. Does anybody have any?
I think it was the third slide, the regression that you showed between the attendance and the poverty rate. I'm assuming with all that data that you've run a lot more thorough regression controlling for the attendance rate.
Yep.
As part of that data, whoever you do end up sharing that with, myself included, could you show the list of variables and what outsized impact that has on the attendance rate?
Yep. So the variables that we usually look at are special ed, free and reduced, gender, grade point average, and poverty rate, which is free and reduced. So those are the 6 that we look at now. So I can send you that regression as well as the chart.
It seems like there would be a ton of points that we could try to put in there as variables that would show either drastically different. I would suspect the correlation would stay roughly the same, but when we're looking at solutions going to next year and years forward, that data can only get stronger as we continue to compile it, and the more variables we can control for, I don't need to tell you that, then the closer we can try to tailor some of these solutions.
Exactly that. So we're trying to control those variables. We're trying to control each individual variable by a specific intervention targeted towards that variable to kind of control that variable and eliminate them. Sometimes it's hard to say, well, this might affect 2 or 3 of these variables, so you can get really into the weeds with that piece. So we're looking at more broader patterns on that. And we are also at the causality of what students are either self-reporting or what counselors are reporting or parents are reporting as the reasons that they're absent. So yeah, we pull a lot of data. And actually, so our poverty rate is rising, right? But it's probably 65% of free and reduced are chronic kids. So it's not completely our poverty kids that are, we have quote-unquote non-poverty kids that are chronically absent as well. And, so I don't want to paint everybody in the same corner. But that's certainly the strongest correlation piece. So.
This would be a great piece to add into the retreat, so you can look at a little detailed dig in. There's one factor that Dr. Bickwood and I talked about that we haven't been able to isolate right now unless we do a little deeper dig, and that's the single-parent home. In terms of trying to manage when you have nobody else other than you to care for 2 or 3 children going to 3 different schools, it's a challenge. That happens to correlate very often strongly with poverty because you have one member trying to support all children. But I think that's a factor that we do need to think about in terms of who has support to help get their children to school.
That comes up a little bit. You'll see that a little bit in the data where they talk about older siblings at the high school caring for younger siblings. Because we actually, we look at a number of circumstances of a student in high school to see if they had younger siblings in any of our, our elementary or middle schools, and a lot of times they were absent on the same day. So the parent is at work, they can't miss work, and a student, maybe a younger student is sick, so the older student will stay home. So that is definitely related to the single parent issue.
The limits of the data obviously being what we're able to identify and more importantly verify for some of these causes too. What are our steps for maintaining and guaranteeing the integrity of the data?
So the data, the data comes, I pull the data from our student information system, okay? So I have my numbers. The numbers that the state pulls are going to be slightly different in terms of numbers because they pull things and they go through their own kind of formulation. So what we found with things like data reporting errors, and I wouldn't say it's a big, maybe 1% at the most. Things like exam days that we're doing right now. If a student, because the way their schedule lines up, would not have a first block exam or a second block exam, maybe, and that would only happen once if a student had, you know, a special circumstance, or they had a study hall in, let's say, a PE after that, like that. Those students, we found out in the past, had been reported as being absent, even though they were excused from school that day because they had no exams. So that's like a data reporting error that goes to the state. The state doesn't know that from anything. They just see the raw numbers. So the state, they look at them, they do care about the story behind the numbers, but I think the narrative that we uncovered is more important. So we're doing that with the hard numbers, the quantitative numbers, the SIS, and things like EdSite and CERC. But we're also looking at like, what are students self-reporting, what are parents self-reporting, what are the parent calls in the morning while their students out, and things like that. So, and sometimes that comes from meetings and the PPT process.
Just, what are the goals for each school for percentage-wise for getting under the truancy? Like, for example, I know another school that's working and they have a 10%, they want all of their kids under 10%. What are you at currently and what is that goal number?
So I calculated us, and I just did the year-end calculations for us at the high school, and we were 22, and I think last year we were 22.4. So my personal goal at the high school would be 18 for next year, and then to stabilize between 15 and 18, depending on the poverty rate. Obviously, if that rate rises, which we hope it doesn't, we still would like to maintain that 15 to 18%. If the rate drops, then we look to increase our goal, to go lower, to go down to closer to 10%. You saw the numbers the first year where we were at 6.5. You know, those are great numbers. There's also a small anomaly is the state changed how they, about 6 or 7 years ago, they changed a little bit how they reported the absent rates, because they used to pull a number on October 15th, and that's how Connecticut did it. And now they pull a year grad at the end, so you pull where they did.
And for any of the other schools, by chance, do you know what your numbers are?
I know that we set our goal each year to reduce it by a certain percentage, and our goal this year, I don't remember the numbers, what we started at, but we wanted to reduce it by 2%, which would matter.
Okay. Because I just think it would be great to also communicate that to some of the parents, because in the communication to parents that the school has like a 10% goal, it helps remind you of you're working towards that goal, and it just that communication routinely to home to parents, reminding them is a great way. So.
I have a question, because a lot of parents bring their kids in for a very short period of time in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Do we count that towards our absentees?
So it's different at each school, because at the younger schools, they have the same teacher all day. So I'm not sure how they report. How do you report?
You show up and you're there.
They consider you there for the day, even though the child leaves within 15 minutes of arriving.
It doesn't usually happen like that,
But it does happen, I know. I was just curious.
At the high school, our periods rotate in the current schedule. So what you'll find is a lot of students will miss that morning block sometimes, but it won't show up because the period rotates, so it'll show up on different blocks because it rotates through the schedule. So if they're coming in tardy or things like that. So what we'll see is, you'll see students with, maybe 28 absences but 30 tardies, because, then getting to school is the issue with the student, and that's, we know that.
So they don't have to go to if they don't go to the first block, but they go to the second, they're not absent?
So they're marked absent for that first block. If they miss more than half the block, they're absent for that block. If they miss, if they come in for their second block, then they'd be present for the rest of the day.
Okay, so they don't have to, it doesn't have to be over half the day to be considered present?
Well, we do that for athletic events and dances and things like that, but for reporting as a student as present, we mark them down to the time in. So basically, they clock in for the attendance office, and if they would leave early, they would clock out. So Mrs. Norton would have a record of their attendance during that day, the time period of that day.
So as you know, in the packet you received, backing against this and having a meeting with the administration, I put a request with you for the board to have both the support and the courage to